I'm Emily Johnston from Fashion for Gras, and I'm here with Next today, celebrating the launch of their new Sofa Brochure. And I'm joined by the king of color and the master of interiors, Will from Bright.Bazaar.
Hey,
Will,
Emily.
tell us a little bit about you as the interiors king.
Sure. So I started a blog called Bright.Bazaar back in 2009. And since then it's grown to have an international audience. And I've kind of become known as the guy that loves colour but also has very accessible interiors. So I've always wanted to make interior design seem less daunting. So I published a book worldwide last year, and I'm currently working on my second one. And the premise of both books is to really give people the confidence to not only discover the colours and interior styles they love, but understand how they can bring them home too.
I've been an Instagram follower of yours forever, so it's
Yeah.
really
High
a huge
five, me
pleasure
too.
woo, to be here with you. Super excited.
Love it.
And guys, we're going to get you a little bit more involved in this as well. So we're going to sit here and talk about interiors and sofas and try and impart as much wisdom as we can today, because we're both huge fans of interiors. But we're looking for you to join in as well. So if you could tweet while we're talking any questions that you have for us, and at the end of about a 20-minute chat, we'll look at those questions and see how many we can take and answer. Just make sure you tweet at NextOfficial and use the hashtag #What'sMySofa. So we're going to go ahead and get into the nitty-gritty here.
Can't wait.
And I thought we'd start off with a question of mine that's a favorite. How did you buy your first sofa? What was that experience for you?
Well, it's funny because I have been obsessed with interiors since I was about 11 years old, and I remember buying like my first interiors magazine literally at that age. So obviously I had to kind of wait until I got to university until I had that first opportunity to really buy a sofa. And it's actually in my second year of university when I moved into a shared house with my housemates. And we all kind of put in money into the kitty, and they said, look, everyone knows you as being the interiors guy. It's all you're like talking about all the time, so you pick the sofa. And it was kind of a fun challenge because obviously we've all got different personalities, but the one red thread between us is that we were all students. So we kind of had the same lifestyle. We were all watching Neighbours at lunchtime together and, hung over on the couch on a Saturday, that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
it's kind of useful to use that kind of shared lifestyle characteristic to help us pick the sofa. So we went for kind of a deep tufted Chesterfield, which was so nice and comfy, and we all loved it. So that was my first couch.
I'm so impressed that you bought your first couch so early, and very embarrassed to say that I bought my first one last year.
Well, you've got to start sometime, right?
Oh, it's so horrible. But coincidentally, actually, my first couch purchase was from Next, because previously I'd always lived in rented accommodation, which I think most Londoners can understand.
Right.
And they come fully furnished. And I had my first flat that wasn't fully furnished, and I had this grand task of choosing a sofa. And I actually had such a good experience, mostly because I found that I was moving into the flat and I didn't have a lot of time to organize everything.
Sure.
And the thing that really drew me to Next was the fact that they had a 4-day delivery scheme.
Which is so awesome.
I mean, it really is incredible. So you narrow down what it is that you want, and then you have 2 guys that come to your house with the sofa to deliver it and put it together. And when I first saw them arrive with legs on the sofa and screws, I thought to myself, I don't even own a screwdriver. How is this going to happen? First world problems. And they came in, put the sofa together, unwrapped everything, and put the legs on the sofa for me, and basically left my living room intact.
Right, so you took your cup of tea from the kitchen counter to your couch.
Yeah,
like,
basically.
Seamless,
It
right?
was the perfect thing. So
Amazing.
I've always been a big fan. But let's segue then into, so we've talked about our first buying experience. And of course, I work in fashion, and I'm really trend-led. And so I'm always thinking about trends in terms of seasons and what's happening with fabrics and colors and shapes. And I feel like interiors has that same sort of vibe, but maybe you could lead me through, is it the same thing? Are trends changing every 6 months? Is it something that's more driven by materials, colors, and how we can all be a part of that as the general public? Sure.
So interiors doesn't move as quickly as fashion, but obviously there are trends that come and go like in anything in life. But I think when it comes to a sofa, you obviously don't buy a new sofa every 6 months or even every year, so it becomes a more considered purchase. So what you can do to kind of keep up with trends, should you wish to, with interiors, is actually think about the smaller incidental pieces that you can layer into a sofa in the rest of the room. So for example, on this Stratus couch here from the new sofa range, Next range, there's this throw pillow. What's great about this is it's not only picking up the colours of the couch itself, but it's accenting it with this metallic. And then I've done that again in the print behind. So just with two simple pieces, you've kind of taken the duck egg couch and given it this kind of glamorous, on-trend metallic touch, which is everywhere right now.
Right.
But say next season, you don't want to have metallics anymore, take this piece away, take the artwork away, and for relatively low cost, you could switch in new textiles. So you might want to go for something very typographic, perhaps more masculine. It could be, you could go for kind of a sand-coloured neutral cushion with a big 2 or number 3 on it, and then reference that with some typographic artwork.
Okay.
So just two simple switches out can help. I think the main thing to do is, if you're feeling nervous about how you can make couches work, is think of something you are good at. So you come from a fashion background, so you know how to put an outfit together like that.
One would hope.
Right. But it's the same thing with a sofa. So once you've got your sofa, you've chosen your sofa and you want to dress it, think of how you would dress an outfit. So like, what would you pair with your favorite pair of jeans? What boots would you choose? What jewelry would you choose? It's the same with a couch. Okay, so I love this couch. If this was the colour of a pair of trousers I was wearing, what rug would I put with it? What shoes would you put with it? And just think of that as kind of mentality, because I think if you can compare designing a room to something that you already feel comfortable with, then it kind of makes you feel more confident. And that's really all it is. It's a lack of confidence that makes decorating feel scary, when really it doesn't have to be at all.
You just really want to make a space, something that reflects you, just like an outfit reflects you on a day-to-day basis.
And if you can do that in your sleep, then you can just take what you know for the principles of that and apply it. The same colour principles, the same textures, because it's the same thing. So try and use something like that to reference to help you.
And it's kind of like what I always say with styling, is that it's about having fun. So there aren't any really set rules, but there is this element of really having a reflection of yourself and having it be a really fun, amazing environment that you've created for yourself.
Right.
And actually, funnily enough, before we sat down here today, we were talking earlier about how much we travel,
not
not much. I think, what do we say? Between us, we've been home a week.
Like in the last 4 months?
Three or 4 months, which is crazy. But also I find, talking about kind of styling and making it your own, that travel can really influence a space, and you can really tie that in. So maybe it is about buying the staple sofa, but then about playing with things that you pick up around the world, and also inspirations from around the world. And how have you found, is that something that you found has really changed the way you do interiors, with all that you've seen and stuff that you bring back? And how has travel really influenced your space?
Travel's a huge part of my job and my life, and I think that you can really tell a personal story through the pieces that you collect. It doesn't have to necessarily be from far-flung places around the world. It could even be from the garage sale or the vintage flea market down the road. It's just layering in pieces that tell your personal story. And a great way to kind of gather all those pieces together is, through a bookcase. So for example, a bookcase doesn't necessarily have to have books on it. You can group together a series of coloured glassware, or it could be a series. Exactly. Yeah. So it's a nice way to kind of tie everything together. And
the art of the shelfie, of course,
right,
at the
on
moment,
Instagram.
massive.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think as well, it's important to think about how, just like with anything in life, things need friends, need pals. So like Taylor's always bringing out her besties on stage, an interior space needs it too. So the sofa comes alive when it's paired with the coffee table, with the rug, with the textile. So, I think people can sometimes look at one piece in a shop or online and think, oh my gosh, how's it going to work? And it's actually just keeping in mind that you're going to pair that with other pieces in the space. So if you're struggling to make a choice, so, Next have, hundreds of sofas to choose from, which is great, but don't let that daunt you. That's a real positive, because it means that whatever your personal style and taste, you're going to be able to find what you want.
Right.
If you're struggling to narrow down what that is, there's very likely something in your house already that you love, whether that's a vase, a piece of statement artwork, could be even a rug.
Yeah.
Make that your hero piece. So you say, right, okay, I'm definitely going to have that in my space, and I want to make sure that everything else I bring into the house, or into that room rather, ties back to it, so that there's this cohesive feel. So for example, if you've got a yellow and grey rug, then you know that you can use grey as your base primary palette, which is typically about 60% of the space. And then you can then bring in 30%, which is your secondary colour, which you introduce through furniture and through soft textiles such as curtains. And then accent colour is typically 10%. So that's what I always say to people when it comes to the couch. and you've got so for example here we've got this duck egg blue couch, and I want to bring in an accent colour to it. You could do that through 10% of the space, which could be either through one big piece, so it could be a brightly coloured rug with accent with it, or you could do it through, say, 2 or 3 pieces. So you could have 2 yellow cushions and a yellow side table lamp that will add up to make 10%. Okay. But keeping those percentages in mind is a great way to kind of make you feel more confident about, oh, am I going to bring too much in? Right. Is it going to be enough to really make a statement? Okay. So that kind of 60-30-10 rule can really help.
Oh, that's really good. And also actually something that Next have just launched that's really helpful that I wish that I had when I was ordering my sofa is, and speaking about the hero piece. So I think if you select something that you sort of want to model your room around, right. The one nice thing they do now is you can order for free 9 swatches of the different sofa fabrics and have it delivered next day. So I feel like that's really helpful to have a swatch of the item that you have in mind to kind of take it. And if you have a lot of things that you've collected over the years and sofas, maybe something that you're adding in later, that you can take those and see how they play with all the different elements in your life.
Right, and it's also, I think the thing is with buying a sofa is it's a really considered purchase. It's not something that you just make overnight, and it shouldn't be. You know, I think that it's really important that, you know, the sofa, just like the couch in Friends became almost like the next character. Yeah. It's the same in your house. When you travel, when you go away, you really look forward to coming back and having that comfort of being on your sofa. It's home, and so you want to make sure you get it right. So to have the ability to pick different styles can really help. That should be seen as something that's positive and that can mean that you're going to end up with a couch you'll love for years.
Okay, now let's just skip right into your living room then.
Sure.
Because I think everyone's dying to know what it is that your living room looks like and how you've put that together. So if we could just go a little bit more on a personal slant and talk about that for a second.
Sure. So my living room was actually on the cover of my first book, which was so exciting. And I remember being so embarrassed and sort of talking to my publishers because they wanted to put it on. And I was like, no, like, you know, I had, it's kind of that self-deprecating thing where you're like, is it good enough? And actually, like, I'm really pleased because I don't actually live in that space anymore. And it's so nice to have that kind of document of it. And that was based around a bright yellow couch that had kind of a mid-century shape to it, actually not too dissimilar to the one that's on the cover of the new Next catalogue. It's kind of got that retro shape and form to it, which is really nice. But it was bright yellow, and people would be like, oh my gosh, that's such a, you know, how did you make that work? And what I did is I used black as a neutral. So a lot of people often think of like beige and white as neutral colours, which they are. Right. But black is actually a great way to temper brighter colours. Because black has got so much strength to it, you can then pair a strong colour with it and it will work. So what I did is, with the yellow couch, I then had a chevron, or striped rather, rug underneath. I had a graphic tree black and white monochrome print wallpaper on an accent part of the wall. And then I had a bookcase in black as well. So those kind of black elements really helped to kind of pull the strength of the yellow down, so they didn't feel too strong. And then I just layered in other colours onto it that I picked out from artwork, so it kind of became this mix and match colourful space. And people were like, wow, I'd never thought that you could kind of make such a strong colour work on such a central piece in the room, but you really can. And I switched up the look of that scheme several times, so you don't need to be afraid that if you pick a couch that's, say, hot pink or lime green, that you can't switch things out and you're going to be stuck with it. Because, yeah, you've got that couch, but you can layer in different accent colours to any colour at any time. Right. It doesn't have to be a neutral colour.
Colour pops are
right. Colour pops work with bright colours as well.
Right.
And actually, in the way that people often want everything neutral and then have maybe a colourful cushions, you can switch it up just like you've done. So you've got a hot pink couch, but then you've kept greys and neutral palettes for the cushions, and it works equally as well.
Right.
But actually, I think it's more interesting because it's more unexpected. You know, you're telling a story, you know, you love this couch, right?
I love this couch.
It fits your personality, it's bubbly, it's bright, it's poppy.
Right.
You know, it suits you, it tells your story, so that's what your home should do.
And actually, you with the yellow couch, after following you on Instagram for so many years, it's perfect reflection
well, I
of
do
you.
love yellow, so...
I'm just thinking of your Instagram page now, and it's just a bright pop of sunshine.
Right, oh, thanks.
So let's segue a little bit into the living in London situation.
Oh.
So we both live in London.
Where do we start?
It has its pluses and minuses. I think one of the biggest minuses, besides not being able to have a walk-in closet, is just space. So space is at a premium. Everyone's dealing with this, you know, always trying to make a small space look bigger, and trying to get sofas that fit in these spaces.
Right.
And so I really think as a Londoner, the biggest thing we face as a problem is just space.
Right.
And so buying a sofa has a new set of problems entirely.
Sure.
Even with things like dimensions of being able to fit it into the house. So even or placing it. So coming from the hallway, the door, the front door, and then placing it in the house. So can you give us some tips on general buying for that space, and also how it is that you look at placing the sofas?
Sure. So, I mean, it's funny because just like you, being in London, I've been in many different rented accommodations, and it's so funny because I think the rental agents always think I'm crazy because I come in with my tape measures and my masking tape and even rolls of craft paper so I can really map out the space. So I always tell my husband to take them off into the kitchen.
Oh gosh.
So that I can kind of go to town because, you know, I love interiors and really want to plan it out and make sure that that space is going to work with my existing pieces plus any new ones that I've got in mind to bring in. So to do that, always think about, like, with a sofa, do the feet come off? If they do, that's going to help with narrowing the size down, so you can get the dimensions off the website. Next are really good at providing all of that online.
Excellent, yes.
That really helps. And don't just measure doorways, also measure the heights of ceilings in stairwells if you're living in a rented apartment block or anything like that. So just get that specific set out. In terms of choosing the sofa to fit a small space, love seats are proving really popular right now, and that can be anything from sort of a two-seater down. And they work in both small rented spaces, but also in large spaces. You'd be surprised. So a love seat is great for a very small living room, but also if you've got a big grand house and you've got a huge expansive hallway or a very glamorous bedroom, actually a bed's just not going to be enough to fill it. So you can actually add in a love seat as a nice luxury touch to have in the hallway or in a bedroom as well. In terms of maximising the feeling of space, try and pick a sofa that is raised up off the ground on feet. So this sofa here that I'm sat on actually goes all the way to the floor.
Right.
That's great. It's a very cool, chunky, heavy style that feels very sumptuous and luxurious. However, if you're in a small space, you want to pick a sofa that's raised up off the floor, a little bit actually, again, like the one that was in my house.
Right.
Because the reason why that works is by having it not going all the way to the floor, it keeps that eye line of sight going throughout the space, so that it doesn't
such a good tip.
So I always say that to people that are in small spaces. So just keep that line of sight. Same with the coffee table. Don't have things going all the way to the floor.
Okay, on the flip side, for the first time in 14 years, I'm actually moving out of London.
Wow, get you.
I know, right? Big move. And I'm looking to have a lot more space.
Right. Bring in that Carrie Bradshaw closet.
Exactly. You read my mind.
Okay.
Turning a bedroom into a closet. And I find that I've become so used to the small space that my interior decorating has really sort of acclimated to suit that, really. And I'm so used to looking at things in a small measure that I all of a sudden find myself very intimidated by the idea of having all this space and having to fill it. And also with the idea of taking a large space and making it cozy.
Sure.
Because I find London living is very cozy, and it's a lovely way to live.
Well, it needs to be because of the weather, right?
Yeah, I mean, you have to be able to curl up in front of a fire and drink a cup of tea. And I'm just wondering how, or if you have any tips for how you create that space, if you have a lot of room to play with.
Sure. So it's funny because even though I've lived in London, I've lived in like kind of modern apartment blocks that have open plan kitchen and living. So it's, although the overall space isn't huge, it's all as one rather than being segmented into different rooms. So what I've actually had quite large spaces to play with, and what I've done in those situations is to use a sofa to zone the space. So what I tend to pick is like a modular sofa. So for example, the Sonoma is a modular sofa in the new Next sofa catalogue, and that's perfect for zoning because it's modular to start with, so you can pick the shape that you want. But I would go for an L shape, and the reason why an L shape is great is because it's like a physical boundary that will zone one half of the room as the living room, and the other half, in my experience, which has been for dining and for cooking. Okay. And then when you have that, that L shape, what's great is you can then make it cozy by putting a really like deep pile rug underneath, a nice coffee table which you can layer with favourite magazines and books. Yes. And then it becomes like a cozy area within a larger space. Another great way to bring a space in is to have a floor lamp that comes over the sofa and hangs down, because that, again, it closes everything in. It makes it feel like a cocooning space, because visually you're pulling the ceiling down, you're pulling the space in,
Right.
but then you've still got that wide area outside it, so that when you're in that area, it feels cozy, but
Lovely.
you're not kind of wasting space.
I'm so done. Ready.
Right.
I'm bringing you over when
Great,
I get
I'm
the
there,
house.
I'm there.
One interesting thing actually is I always thought when you buy sofas that you buy suites. So you buy everything the same color and then you sort of accessorize, you do your color pops through that. Then when we came in here today and I saw the two sofas, my loving the pink and yours sort of the beautiful pale blue, seeing them together was a whole new concept for me. And I just wondered, is that something that people do? Is mixing and matching sort of a done thing? Or is it more, you know, I know people are probably more comfortable and traditionally they do buy suites. But this is just such a lovely idea. And, and how would you do that? And how do you think that works and ties in?
So, I mean, if you were to, for example, so starting with, this is obviously one of my favorites from the collection.
Yeah.
So you could style this, there's a mood board actually I created, which I think they're going to show on screen, which is great. And that shows that if you wanted to kind of give this an industrial feel, you could bring in kind of an iron-based coffee table with an exposed wood top. And then you could layer in kind of graphic textural vases as well to give it that kind of feel. But if you were to then wanted to bring in an armchair, you don't have to necessarily pick it in exactly the same style. If you were going for, say, a very contemporary look like the Sonoma sofa, in that kind of circumstance, it works to have a slightly more linear line in terms of choosing the types of pieces that you'll go for, because that is the look in itself. It's sleek, it's contemporary. But if you wanted to go for kind of a more mix and match shabby chic look, you could mix and match styles. The way to make it work is to have a red thread through it. So for example, if you wanted to ping a heritage piece in with something that has more contemporary shape and form, so more linear shapes, you can do it, but make sure that the fabric choice is the same, or the colour palette of the pattern is the same, so that there is something that ties them together. So they can have a different shape and be a different aesthetic, but they do need something that they relate to one another.
Okay. Well, let's wrap this up by talking about your top sofa buying tips. So if you could impart the very best information as possible for people to take away and really, you know, take it to heart when looking on the website and really trying to figure out, because of course there are 100 fabrics available on the next website, 30 different shapes and styles, so the combinations are endless. And I think it can seem quite intimidating to some people, the sofa buying experience from the start. So if there are a few top tips you could give for people to take away, what would those be?
So I think, as well as, like, we've obviously talked a lot about like picking styles and how you can use that, but in terms of, like, I think quality is so important as well. It's like people, it's such a, it's an investment piece in your home, a sofa, you know, and it's not something you do that regularly, so people want to make sure they're getting good quality. And a great way to check that is if you're in the showrooms, pick up a sofa from one corner, and lift it. And once it gets about 6 inches off the floor, the other side should raise as well. If it doesn't, it means it's probably like a pine frame. They're very cheap and they tend to warp and only last, you know, 3 to 5 years max. So that's something to avoid. The great thing is about Next sofas, they're all hardwood frames. So you will find that won't happen with Next sofas. But that's a really good tip to test out quality, to make sure that the frame of the sofa is of a high quality. Also try and think about the upholstery. That's really important. So Next obviously have 21 different leathers, and I think something like just over 100 different fabrics. There's lots to choose from, but you need to make sure you're picking the right one for the use of the sofa. So you know, earlier on we talked about how if you had a big space, you might bring a love seat into a bedroom or as an occasional seat in a hallway. There you could go for a very delicate fabric like a silk that's very luxurious and nice, because it's not going to be sat on all day, every day, get lots of wear and tear. So it doesn't need to be highly durable. However, if you're bringing a sofa into a family room or a playroom that's going to have, you know, children jumping all over it, people on and off it all the time, you want to go for something that's got, you know, a tough weave to it. Cotton is very popular as well, and try to avoid in those circumstances, fabrics that have got pattern printed on them, you really want to go for something with a pattern weaved into it, because that's going to be much more durable.
Okay.
So that's really important. So you're kind of thinking about the quality of the frame, the picking of the upholstery and the fabric. That's the next important thing, but also the springs. So most sofas have what's called serpentine springs. So we're going to get a bit technical, but there are two kind of joints. There are serpentine springs, and then there's the 8-way hand-tied springs. Now, there's kind of two schools of thought, but most people say there isn't actually that much difference, and that the serpentine, which is the tied pre-assembled springs, are fine. The main thing to do when you're testing out a sofa to see if the springs are of good quality is sit on it and see if you can feel the springs through. If you can, probably not. It's probably best to avoid it.
Okay.
And if you can't, you're on to a winner.
Fantastic. Good tips.
Great.
Oof. Good for me. Okay, so I think what we're going to do now is we're going to take a few questions.
Sure.
So we've had some people come in on Twitter. Excuse me, guys, while I look at my phone for a second. So we'll start off the first one. I'm worried that if I choose a bright sofa, that it will soon go out of style. What should I do?
They should buy that bright sofa.
I think Will's going to tell you to buy the bright sofa no matter what happens.
But it's, I mean, I am obviously a pro colour, but it's. I think, like we talked about, how interiors aren't the same as fashion. So kind of like you might buy a pair of skinny trousers and worry that they're going to go out of fashion next season. With a sofa, there are obviously styles, so obviously like mid-century retro styles in the last kind of 5 years have become very, very popular. But it doesn't mean that traditional shapes have gone out of fashion. You can still kind of dress them up in a modern and contemporary way. So in terms of colour, it's the same thing. So like I was saying about my bright yellow sofa, I mixed and matched that up in terms of styles. So on the cover of my book, it had a very kind of whimsical feel. So it had lots of animal print cushions, which was so on trend kind of 2 years ago. And then I switched it out to actually just go for completely monochrome. So I had yellow, and then I just brought in black and white striped cushion, a white linen, and then another black and white kind of herringbone effect. And so but it all worked. So it just shows that actually you don't have to have a neutral couch to be able to switch up the look of it. Even with a brightly coloured couch, you can change the look of it with those incidental pieces. And what's so great about that is it's such an affordable way to change up the look of the space.
Yeah, that's true. And I would say if you're drawn to a bright color, there's a reason you're drawn to that color.
Right.
You should just buy it and then make it work. And look at your Pinterest, because you have great stuff on Pinterest, actually.
Thanks.
And the blog, looking at how you can work the bright colors and sort of tone them down to meet your requirements.
Right, and like I was saying about using the black as like tempering it. So you can like temper brighter colors so just like with your hot pink couch here, you've chosen these mix and match pillows that are actually clashing patterns, but the reason it works is because there's a red thread that they're all from this kind of neutral toned down grey palette. And what they do in turn is they're tempering the strength of that pink so that it looks cohesive, it looks stylish, and it doesn't just like wow you with that. It feels like a considered scheme.
Okay, next question. Hope that was answered okay for everybody. So, I'm looking for a throw for my grey sofa. What colour should I go for? It's all about colour with you, isn't it?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess the great thing about, they said their sofa was grey. Grey is fairly neutral, so you can kind of mix and match depending on how your mood takes you. I mean, I think yellow and grey look fantastic together, but a yellow and grey are going to cause high contrast. So that would be a case where you would just need to bring in, say, one yellow cushion or one yellow throw. You don't want to bring in 3 yellow cushions and a yellow throw because the contrast is so strong that would be overpowering. Just one will be fine. The rule when it comes to accent colour is less is more.
Fantastic. Okay, so another question. How can I create a scene that would allow me to change colour theme with season?
So again, you want to think about keeping your hero pieces paired back. So what you don't want to do is go for anything with a lot of graphic pattern, a lot of a very specific kind of shape or form. Colour, it doesn't matter as much because, as we said, we talked about how you can temper it or brighten it with the pieces that you layer in. But if you went for something that had a very, very striking pattern, that's going to limit you to what else you can do in the space because you can't then bring in more seasonality-based pieces. Because if you've already got a sofa that's covered in stripes and you want to change it up seasonally, it's going to be difficult because you're going to be more tied down on what you can and can't do. Going for a solid sofa gives you the flexibility to switch things up as the seasons go.
Which leads perfectly into our next question. How would you style your sofa differently going into winter? And I know actually faux fur pillows and throws and things those are some of my favorite things for winter.
Right.
And I love the kind of the cozy
Luxe feel.
Yeah,
right.
really luxe. Is that something that you would say everyone should do, or are you kind of more of a let's do bright colors for winter because it's too cozy, or what's your feeling on that?
Well, I mean, I think like the great thing is like colours can work any season. So, for example, you know, jewel tones are so nice in the winter. Those kind of dark, sumptuous tones like plums, racing green that feel very kind of enveloping and cozy and cocooning. They can work really well in terms of colours. In terms of dressing and styling, I tend to keep mine fairly consistent throughout the year. Obviously, in the summer, I'm not putting throws over me to cozy up, so I tend to just pull those out of, you know, rattan baskets and things that I have in my living room. And just pull them out when they're needed.
Okay.
But, you know, again, it's personal preference. I like to just have, you know, a smattering of, say, 2 to 4 cushions on my sofa. But if you've got something that's got a very deep plane to it, you can fill it with more. But if you've got something that's kind of narrow, like a mid-century style, retro, the shape and form is so beautiful, you don't want to cover it.
Right.
So go for smaller pieces, maybe 1, 2 max.
Okay. And this one, I think, is a question that a lot of people have asked, and we'll just do this one because it seems to be repeating itself, about cushions on the sofa. And we've had a lot of questions of people asking about how they buy cushions, how many should they get, how many is too many.
Right.
And I know I've heard that a lot from people saying, oh, I have like 6 or 7 cushions and I'm actually taking them off my sofa to sit at night.
Right.
Is there some sort of magic rule of thumb for that?
Well, I guess, again, it kind of relates to the shape and style of the sofa that you've got. If you're going to go for something that is like a small love seat, or the kind of the more petite retro style that has a shallower depth on it, then again, you want the focus there to be on the gorgeous shape of the sofa rather than filling it with cushions, and because you're going to hide it and it will look kind of ridiculous.
Right.
If you've got like these kind of more sumptuous, very kind of generously proportioned sofas that can take, as you've done here, we've kind of got big cushions. But if you only had the 2 big ones, they would kind of jar. You've broken it up really nicely by having a smaller grey solid. Breaks up the palette, but it also switches up the size. So what I always say to people is when you're buying cushions, people think, oh, it all needs to match. I need to buy 2 of the same. They have to be exactly the same size. Absolutely not. You'll get a more organic, stylish look if you mix up the pattern, the size, and the colour.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I feel like I've learned so much about sofas.
Good.
I'm going to go home and reassess.
Timing, right?
I know, right? Perfect timing. But even today, I feel like I'm going to go home and reassess everything that I've done. Good and bad, I suppose.
No, I'm sure it's all good.
But yeah, thank you so much. And for everyone else, remember that next.co.uk has everything that you need to know there. The new Sofa Brochure is online and can be picked up in store. And yeah, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, guys. Bye.